In this video, we'll be looking at solving multi-step equations, which means that we may need to use 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 steps to solve these equations. Now remember, when we say we're solving equations, we're asking to find a number or some value to replace the letter with, the variable, that would result in a true statement. And that's our goal. So if we take a look at number 1 here, the first thing you should notice is that we have x's both on the left side and on the right side. We want to know what is the value of x. What can we replace x with so that we get a true statement? Alright, so here we go. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that all the variables are on one side of the equation. That could be the left, could be the right. Doesn't matter. In this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move all my x's to the left hand side of the equation, which means I'm going to take those two x's and I'm going to pick them up and move them to the left side. And the way I'm going to do that is by subtracting. We're going to subtract two x's. Alright, so by subtracting two x's, I no longer have any x's here. All I have is that negative 6. Remember, I'm subtracting those two x's from the 4 x's I had to begin with. So 4 x's minus 2 x's would give me 2 x's. Bring down that plus 9. So this is our first step. The second thing we're going to do is now what we're going to do, since we have all the x's on the left side, is now we're going to move the 9 to the other side. And the way we're going to move the 9 is subtract it. Remember, we're always doing the opposite. So the opposite of adding 9 is subtracting 9. Alright, so by subtracting 9, I no longer have that here. All I have is 2x. And what we're going to do here is subtract the 9. So negative 6 minus 9 is going to result in a negative 15. So notice the equations get a little smaller here. That's the second step. The third and final step here is to finally solve for x. And notice what we're doing here is multiplying by 2. So we're going to do the opposite of that. We're going to go ahead and divide by 2. So by dividing by 2, we've got a negative 15. We're going to divide that by 2. And here we end up with a negative 7.5. Therefore, our solution to this equation is negative 7.5. In other words, if I were to replace each of those x's with a negative 7.5, we end up with a true statement. Alright, number 2, we have the equation negative x minus 2 is equal to 3x plus 5. We're going to solve for x. Now, just as we did on number 1, we're going to start by getting all the x's on one side of the equation. I personally like them on the left, but we could also move them to the right. So what I'm going to do first is start by subtracting 3x from both sides. So I no longer have any x's over here. All I have is the 5. Now remember, I'm subtracting those 3 x's from that negative x I had to begin with. So I've got a negative 1x minus 3x, which is going to result in a negative 4x. And now I'm going to bring down that minus 2. So there's my first step, moving all the x's to the left side of the equation. Next thing I'm going to do is take care of that minus 2. The opposite of subtracting 2 would be to add 2. So this is no longer there. Negative 4x is going to equal to a 7, because 5 plus 2 equals 7. Now I can go ahead and do my third and final step. That's going to be dividing by 4. So 7 divided by negative 4 would result in a negative 1.75. So the solution to this equation is negative 1.75. Alright, so here's our next example. 2x minus 5 times x plus 1 is equal to 3x plus 1. Now notice on this one we have some parentheses. So the first thing we're going to have to do is get rid of those parentheses. And the way we do that is using something called distributive property. What I'm going to do is take this negative 5, multiply it with that x, which results in a negative 5x. I'm also going to take that negative 5 and multiply it with this 1 right here. So negative 5 times that 1 is a negative 5. Everything else is still the same. Still got the 2x, still got the 3x plus 1. So there's my first step, getting rid of the parentheses using distributive property. Now you'll notice in the equation I have three different x's. I've got a 2x, I've got a negative 5x, and I've got a 3x. So what I need to do is gather all the x's together on one side of the equation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by taking these 2x's and the negative 5x and combining them first. So 2x's minus 5x's would result in a negative 3x. So that's what I get from combining those two right there. Still got the negative 5 or minus 5 and 3x plus 1 on the right side. Now again, I'm trying to get all those x's on one side of the equation. So I'm going to take these 3 x's that are on the right side, pick them up, and move them over here to the left side. And we're going to do that by subtracting. Okay, so there's no more x's on this side, just the 1. So negative 3x's minus 3x's is going to result in a negative 6x. Still got that negative 5 there. Alright, so the equation get a little smaller here, which means we're getting closer to the solution. The next thing we're going to do is the opposite of subtracting 5. The opposite of subtracting 5 is adding 5. So that's gone. We got negative 6x is equal to 1 plus 5 is going to give me a 6. We're almost there. Here we have negative 6x is equal to 6. The opposite of multiplying by negative 6 is dividing by negative 6. So if I divide here, 6 divided by negative 6 would result in a negative 1. Therefore, my solution to this equation is going to equal to negative 1. Alright, let's take a look at one more example. 4x plus 3 times 2x minus 4 is equal to x. Now, just like we did on number 3, we're going to start by using some distributive property. And we need to do that so we can get rid of these parentheses. So 3 times a 2x is going to be a positive 6x. 3 times the negative 4 is going to give us a negative 12. Everything else is the same. Still got that x, still got this 4x here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to gather up all of our x's. I'm going to start by combining these two together here. So 4x's plus 6x's is going to give us 10x's. Now notice I have an x on the left, but I also have one on the right. So we're going to gather up all the x's on one side of the equation. Remember, it doesn't matter what side we move them to. It just needs to be on one side. I'm going to go ahead and stick with moving them to the left. So what I'm going to do is take this x that's on the right, and I'm going to subtract it. Now notice over here, if I subtract x minus x, I have nothing left over here. And the number we use for nothing is 0. So there's nothing over here on the right. I've got 10 x's. I'm taking away 1x. So 10 x's minus 1x is going to leave me with 9 x's. Bring down that minus 12. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and add 12. That's the opposite of subtracting 12. So if I add 12, 0 plus 12 is going to give me a 12. The last thing we're going to do here is we're going to divide by 9. And if I divide 12 by 9, 12 divided by 9 results in 1.3333, and it continues on and on and on. Therefore, this is our solution. Now keep in mind an alternative way of writing that is we can also just leave it as a fraction. X is equal to 12 over 9. This would be a more accurate answer. Okay, so either one of those is acceptable. The decimal is just an estimate. The 12 over 9 would be an exact solution.